Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on which part of the world you are. I am here in Sydney, Australia, and welcome to the channel. I hope you guys are doing great. Now, in this channel, I like to talk about religion, and today we'll be talking about Islam. Now, several months ago, Dr. Zakir Naik, a very famous Muslim apologist, he made a video about how to convince non-Muslims as to bring them into the fold of Islam. Now, I found this video very misleading, and that is why I decided to make this video as a response to the video from Dr. Zakir Naik. The video is titled "The Most Convincing Factor for Non-Muslims to Accept Islam." So this is the video that I'm referring to, and let me play quickly part of it.
There are various reasons that the non-Muslims accept Islam, and the most common and the best reason is Tawheed, oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what the survey said. My reply to the first question, the survey done in Mannheim University in Germany, that the people who are the most satisfied are the Muslims. And the reason is Tawheed. The oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the concept of God in Islam is unique. Though all the religions basically believe in monotheism. But Tawheed is not merely monotheism. It is far above that. Besides believing in one God, we should also worship Him and no one else. And if you hear my talk on conflict,
Besides believing in one God, we should also worship Him and no one else. Now, there are two keywords in this sentence. Believing, besides believing in one God, we should also worship Him. So, believing, that is my first keyword. And the second is, we should also worship Him and no one else, at the very end of what Dr. Zakir Naik said. So, these are the two keywords that I would like to focus on in this video: believing and no one else. Now, why is this important? Because if I boil it down, like all the things that I have learned in my life, I'm in my mid-30s, all the things that I have learned in my life, if I boil it down, if I bring it down to one word, what that single word can be: illusion. If I boil it down, everything that I have ever learned in my schools, in my college, during the exploration, like the little exploration of studies of philosophies that I have gone through, if I boil it down everything, there's just only one word at the end: illusion. Now, I first come across this notion of illusion from Daniel Kahneman when I was reading his book Thinking Fast and Slow. Now, in that book, he talks about different types of illusion: memory illusion, visual illusion, cognitive illusion, and then he also talks about different types of biases. Like, I actually forgot many of those terms: representativeness, biases, system one, all those things. That why, why we human make mistake because of some inherent deficiencies in our system, in our thinking processes. So the idea is that illusion, it normally means that it actually means that all of our beliefs are wrong. All of our beliefs, like that is when I started to thinking, when I read Daniel Kahneman's book, that is when I started to thinking about my blind spots, about the faults of my own. Because like we all think that we are right. Every one of us, like what is the source of all the conflict on this earth? Self-righteousness. We all think that we are right. That is why we do the things, even if it's that thing is actually quite wrong. That is why we get into conflict with other people, because everyone is right in their own ways. That is the source of all the conflict. But when I started to thinking that I could be wrong, that is when my focus shifted. And of course, later on, I come across this notion of Maya from Swami Vivekananda's volume 2. He described about the notion of Maya again. We are talking about Hinduism, and then of course I read Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita chapter 11 verse 2 to 7. I don't know if you're aware of it. There was a war between two clans, Pandavas and Kauravas. Might, Pandavas was the side of the right and Kauravas was the side of the might. So right versus might. Krishna gave himself as an advisor to the side of the right, and of course he gave his army to the side of the might. So this was the war between two clans of the same house. And just before the war took place, when Arjuna, Krishna's disciple Arjuna, didn't want to take up the arms, Krishna said, "You were deluded." To remove this delusion, to remove this veil of Maya, Krishna gave Arjuna divine vision. That now you see, because you cannot see, now you see. That in hundreds and thousands of wonderful forms in various shapes, sizes, and colors. Behold, Arjuna, everything moving, non-moving in this universe, you behold within this universal form. He is talking about that everything on this earth, moving, non-moving, within this universal form, that everything is me. So you're not going to kill anyone, you're not going to destroy anything. You just have to shed this weakness, you just have to shed this delusion and take up the arms to fight the evil. That was the message from Bhagavad Gita. So going back to the notion of Maya, that I first, illusion was the beginning, and then I come across the notion of Maya from Swami Vivekananda's. Now, the Maya is not only about illusion, but is actually far, far greater. This idea of Maya. Its significance is far, far greater than what I initially thought. It says that, there are fundamentally two things on earth. Like, again, all of these things are described by Swami Vivekananda's. Prana and Akasha. Prana, energies, and space, Akasha, space. So it says that, like Swami Vivekananda tells us, that this whole world, this whole universe is nothing but these two things. Of course, he found these things from the Vedas. This is not his own revelation. He was describing the Vedas, that how Vedas see this world, how Vedas approach this notion of Maya. That there are two fundamental things, if you want to call them things, there are two fundamental things on this earth. One is prana, and the other one is akasha. Prana means energy, and akasha means space. Like if you think about an atom, what is an atom? Almost 95% of it, like electron, proton, neutron, if you exclude those things, it's space. And we don't know why so much of an atom is nothing but space. We don't know it. Like if you squeeze this earth, if you can take out all the space out of this earth, you probably would be able to fit it into a spoon. You probably would be able to fit it into a spoon. That is how much space we have. Right now I am, recording this video on a mobile device. You may call it a mobile device, but if you can take the space out of it, it's probably like a speck. And that is like everything, right? I have a wall in front of me. I have a wall behind me. It looks like a wall. But if you take this space out of it, well, if you can do that, it's probably like a speck. So this idea, this notion of illusion, that what you are seeing is not actually what it is. Like that is what the notion of illusion is, right? I mean, if I bring it down to the most fundamental level, the most naive understanding of illusion is that you go to the desert, you see water, you run after it, but there is no water in the desert, it's just a mirage. So what is an illusion? A mirage in the desert. So you may call this a wall. The wall you can see right behind me, you can call it a wall, but it is nothing but space. If you can squeeze it down, you will see that there is nothing but space. And this is what Hinduism says that there is fundamentally two things on earth: space and energy, prana and akasha. So you see a wall, but it is not a wall, it's a space. You see a mobile device, you see a laptop, you see a computer, you see a car, you see a tree. What is this tree or the car or the house or the walls or whatever it is? It's nothing but space. And those space is under the influence of prana, is under the influence of another another thing. In Hinduism is called energy, prana. So this duality, like Maya talks about these things, and of course, like on a physical level, that this is not what is real. Like we are talking about all the physical objects here, right? But this is not what is real. What really is there is just an illusion. You may call it a tree, you may call it a car, but it is not what a tree is, what a car is. It looks like, you give it a name, you give it a label, but it is fundamentally space. That is the physical level of this notion of Maya. And then it talks about, like again, Swami Vivekananda's, it talks about the duality, that me, myself, and the like within and without, that we have a reality within ourselves and then we have a reality without. Now it says that there is no such duality on nature. In the nature, there is no such duality. There is only one thing. You and the rest of the world is but one. Again, if you think about the energy and space, it does make sense that energy, there is only one energy, and there is space. Space is under the influence of energy, and that's why it looks like different. You look like that yourself is different than the rest of the world. But Hinduism says that there is no such distinction. This is because you cannot see it, because you are under the influence of this veil of Maya, this illusion. So when you think about these things, when you think about belief, like as Zakir Naik was talking about, that believing, besides believing in that God, we should also worship him and no one else. So believing. So what is a belief? It's nothing but an illusion. A belief fundamentally is nothing but an illusion. And Zakir Naik was telling us that this is the most important factor as to why non-Muslims should accept Islam. An illusion. Essentially, this is what he's saying, that you should also believe in Allah and no one else. We are getting there, no one else, but belief. If you think about the first part, believing, you're believing something, you're holding on to an illusion, and is that, and this is the reason why you should accept Islam. Like if you go to Hinduism, Hinduism talks about giving up the belief, realizing God within you, giving up the belief. In chapter 11, verse 2 to 7, the verse that I mentioned at the very beginning, that the reason you cannot see when, like Krishna giving Arjuna divine vision, because you cannot see. To remove this, the veil of illusion, Krishna gives Arjuna divine vision. To removing this veil is the objective of Hinduism, and while clinging onto it, clinging onto a mirage, clinging onto an illusion is, according to Zakir Naik, not according to me, according to Zakir Naik, is the most convincing reason as to why non-Muslims should accept Islam. And now let's come to the second part. And no one else. That is what he said, that we should, besides believing in one God, Allah, and worshipping him, we should also worship no one else. Rejection. Why do we Hindus say that everything is God's manifestation? Again, prana and akasha, energy and space. That this energy is nothing but God. We are talking about God, right? That God is like polytheism, pantheism, whatever you want to call it. Hinduism says that everything is God's manifestation. So why do we say this? Because energy. We think that there is an energy in this space, that controls this universe, and that energy is we are referring to as God, and that's why we say that everything is God's manifestation. And that is the basis of pantheism, polytheism, whatever you want to call it. So what does it actually mean? If everything is God's manifestation, that means everything is God, everything is you, energy, everything is you, acceptance, everything is God's manifestation. You are accepting everything. You are being humble. Why Hindus bow down? Like, there are other reasons behind it, but this is a notion as to why you should be more humble. You should be much more down to earth. But when you are coming to this notion of no one else, that you should reject no one else, then you are talking about exclusion. You are talking about putting them aside. No one else. That is what Tawheed means. No one else. You are putting the other gods and other goddesses aside. You are rejecting them. Acceptance versus rejection. One is saying that everything is God's manifestation, polytheism, pantheism. And the other one is saying that you should reject it. You have to reject it in Quran, chapter 4, verse 48 and chapter 4, verse 116, that it's a grave sin to associate partners with Allah. It's a grave sin. Quran, you can read it. It's a grave sin to associate partners with Allah. So to believe in God, again, it's an illusion. Believe it's an illusion. You also have to reject all the other gods and goddesses. And this is what you see the history of Islam, why it is so violent, why it is so brutal, why it is so ruthless, because it talks about rejection, it talks about hatred, rejection. You are talking about excluding them, you are talking about destroying them. It talks about destruction, it talks about rejection. So does it sound like an idea that you should cling on to, you should believe in? Again, this is what Dr. Zakir Naik is telling you. Is this something, the most convincing factor as to why I should accept Islam, or anyone else for that matter? To cling on to an illusion, and of course to destroy all other cultures. Is that the reason why people should accept Islam? They should follow Islam? Well, in my humble opinion, I think this is the most convincing reason as to why people should reject Islam, not accept it. Most convincing reason as to why everyone should reject Islam. And if you think otherwise, please let me know. I'd be glad to be enlightened by your wisdom. Thank you very much.